just heard, but my dad whispered in my ear, "Go slowly, talk slowly," because I'm usually quite a fast talker. So thank you so much, Steve. It was such a lovely surprise to have you introduce me. It's great to be back in Manhattan. When people learn that I'm from Kansas, the question I always get is, how did you end up in the Democratic Republic of Congo for nearly a decade? And I usually give them an answer that is equally as perplexing. Well, it started in Minnesota. As some of you may know, I attended the University of Minnesota and ran cross country and track. One of my teammates was named Awiti Omat, and Awiti was from Sudan. He had come to America when he was a refugee when he was around 10 years old. He had fled his town, which burned to the ground, and was left with just one sibling, his brother. He was placed by a refugee agency, and he ended up in South Dakota from Sudan. So as you can imagine, the winters in South Dakota were a little bit different than Sudan. As a friend and teammate, I got to learn Awiti's story. As an 18-year-old, it shattered my understanding of the world. It's one thing to read about these tragedies on the news. It's another thing to have a friend and teammate who has experienced all of those tragedies. As Steve said, as my senior year of college, I was attending Christ Presbyterian Church in Minnesota, and they've started a partnership with an organization called Heal Africa, based in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And Congo's in the heart of Africa, with 67 million people. It's the size of the US, about east of the Mississippi River. It suffered one of the most brutal colonial regimes under King Leopold and the Belgians. And the country has been rocked with conflict since 1994, which has only subsided in the last several years. So it was in this context that Heal Africa was founded by a Congolese orthopedic surgeon and his British wife. It was staffed entirely with Congolese health professionals, and the church that I was going to in Minneapolis started supporting the training of doctors and other healthcare professionals. Though I was entirely unprepared for the job, they hired me in 2006, and I worked for Heal Africa for 3 years. Many people have the chance to work with larger international nonprofit organizations or aid organizations, but I felt very lucky to be working within a Congolese organization to kind of understand the whole aid industry from the inside out. So while I was working with Heal Africa, I fell sick with malaria and was in the hospital for several days. So, like some odd movie, I had heard that Ben Affleck was going to be in the region. And so there I was, hooked up to an IV, literally wearing all black, looking like I'm at a funeral. And Ben shows up in the hospital room to say, hello and to give me good wishes. So at that time, Congo was going through multiple different wars, and the hospital that I had worked at gained a lot of notoriety in the region, and so we randomly had our fair share of celebrity visits, including George Clooney and Angelina Jolie and Ben Affleck. So fast forward 2 years later, in 2009, Ben and his colleague reached out to me to start up an organization that would just provide grants to local Congolese organizations. They very much wanted to take a local solution approach and not kind of come in as the Western organization in a developing country who's trying to impose their ideas. And they figured I could be the right person based on my experience and my work with Heal Africa and working with local organizations. So the premise was to start and to run the organization with humility, that it wasn't just white Americans coming into Congo to tell them what to do to fix a problem, but instead that we would come alongside our Congolese partners and work together towards a better solution. So that was in 2009, and to date we've given more than 80 grants to local Congolese organizations working in economic development, maternal and child health, access to justice, and higher education. Many international aid organizations can have the tendency to drop in a foreign country, prescribe a lot of quick solutions that may not have any contextual basis to the country that they're working in. And I've seen many such programs and organizations. So we wanted to shift this paradigm and assume that our Congolese partners were best placed to develop these solutions. One of the ways we did this was through coffee and cocoa farmers. Most farmers just live on $1 to $2 a day, and due to decades of conflict and war, their crop cycles have been interrupted and they've been cut off from both international and local markets. Yet Congo has the potential to produce some of the highest quality coffee in the world, and farmers were really only receiving 20% of the value that they could actually receive. So we spent the last 3 years working with farmers to improve, I can't see the screen, sorry. Are there pictures up there? No? What does it look like? Okay. So we spent the last 3 years working with farmers to improve the quality of their crop, while also working with the coffee buyers to assure them that they would get the coffee that they had ordered. So 3 years later, now we've tripled farmer income, increased their access to crop financing, which was non-existent before, and now you can find Congolese coffee in Starbucks this fall from our Congolese partner businesses. Is the Starbucks up there yet? Okay. So we received donations to start this initial project, and we have a great problem is that our demand is greater than the supply that we actually have. So we're continuing to scale and to work with these farmers. So a few years ago, while we were hiring people to kickstart our coffee work, we noticed that there was a lack of qualified university graduates to really help us develop the business side, because we were working primarily with farmers who had limited education and living on just a couple dollars a day. But we also needed university students or graduates to help us solidify the business component of it. 70% of Congolese are smallholder farmers, and the country's future is agribusiness. Yet this formal training seemed to be missing. So we teamed up with a local university to start an agribusiness program to train students how to develop ethical agribusinesses that would positively impact smallholder farmers. We also provided scholarships for female students who wanted to study agribusiness. This, I believe, is a picture of a UCBC student that we've worked with and trained, and chocolate, whoops. This, there we go, okay. This is a picture of a student, and the guy in the background is actually the executive vice president of Starbucks. So who came down and was kind of just floored by the potential and the possibility in the face of tragedy in Congo. And so this picture, I love this picture because it adequately represents what we're really trying to do. Is you have a farmer in the picture, you have a recent graduate of university, and you have the coffee roaster in the picture. And our goal is to work ourselves outside of the picture. What we see as sustainable development and aid is that we are there to make that initial investment, mitigate that initial risk for both the producers and for the end purchasers, but then eventually we work ourselves out of the picture. So while we were also working with coffee farmers, we recognized that maternal and child health were critical issues that we needed to work on. The Congo is one of 5 countries that makes up for 50% of the maternal and child deaths in the world. And Congo's at the bottom of that list, meaning that mothers and children are dying there at a faster rate than anywhere else in the world. To address this, we teamed up with Heal Africa to develop an approach which improved the quality of healthcare in rural areas through health professional training and improvement of health facilities. We also worked with our partner coffee cooperatives to develop a community-based insurance plan that covered where the coffee producers covered 50% and the insurance covered 50%. We made the initial investment in that, and again, now it's running on its own with our support. So as you see, we have an integrated approach to aid. The goal is to increase the income and well-being of those living in abject poverty. And we have several short-term and long-term goals. But at the end of the day, we want to work ourselves out of business, and this is central to our aid model. It's about sustainability and the feasibility of the solution lasting after the aid is no longer there. This is also how we work with former child soldiers and other at-risk youth. We support a Congolese organization that provides professional training to former child soldiers, at-risk youth, such as teenage mothers who have never studied before. We provide them vocational training in trades such as auto mechanics, welding, carpentry, and any type of sustainable trade where they can actually make an income, a dignified income from. So I believe here is a picture, a baby, cute baby. Young man. So here's a picture of a young man who was a former child soldier, was co-opted into a rebel group when he was 12 years old. He went through a whole entire training program with us, and now he has his own welding business and employs 5 other young men who also went through the same program. So now he's a business owner employing men. And again, we made the initial investment, but now he's running his own business. And this is what we really feel is sustainable aid. So I was blessed to have Lynn Lucy as one of my mentors. Lynn was British. She founded Heal Africa with Dr. Joe Lucy, Congolese orthopedic surgeon, and lived in Congo for more than 35 years before she passed away several years ago. She encountered all types of discouragement and loss, and she was resilient in the face of tragedy. Lynn's solution was to always keep her head down and work with her Congolese colleagues who she knew would be there through the good times and through the rough times. And her favorite verse, which helped her get through the day and remind her always how to carry herself, was Micah 6:8, which states, "And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." When we think of all the heartbreaking tragedy that is happening today, whether it's the poverty in Congo, or the Syrian refugee crisis, or the families forced to flee their towns under ISIL control, or the natural disasters, the poverty and inequality that exists here in the States, it's very easy to be overwhelmed and ask God how I could ever attempt to help or make an impact in the variety of crises that exist across the world and here at home. I often think of this myself, that despite our work, we're just addressing a very, very small portion of a very, very large problem. And I occasionally feel discouraged that we should be doing more. And then last week, God reminded me through a story that he asked me just to be me and to do what I can do. The story was often told by the Jewish philosopher Martin Buber, who said, "A rabbi named Zusha died and went to stand before the judgment seat of God. As he waited for God to appear, he grew nervous thinking about his life and that God would ask him, 'Zusha, why weren't you Moses? Or why weren't you Solomon? Or why weren't you David?' But when God appeared, the rabbi was surprised. God simply said, 'Zusha, why weren't you Zusha?' God has given each one of us different talents and gifts to offer back to the world, and to use them by acting justly, by loving mercy, and by walking humbly with our God."